Yeah. Uh.
Okay. Welcome to the G Squad Chronicles podcast, where we have frank discussions about life, love, and how to handle all of life's wonderful surprises. My name is Gail, and I'm your host and captain of the G Squad. To my existing tribe, thank you for continuing to ride with me and welcome home. To those new to the squad, welcome, and I'm delighted that you're here. Now, remember, if you go into YouTube and you like the content that we share, please remember to like the video and click to subscribe to the channel, and then click the notification bell on my channel so that you'll be notified whenever I upload new content. So we have a very special show today. I'm super excited. I have some very special guests in the squad house with me today, and we're going to be discussing how to start to rebuild your life after any type of traumatic experience. We have Miss Tracy Burr, who, like myself, will be sharing how she's recovering and rebuilding from a recent traumatic experience. And I'm also extremely excited and honored because I have in the house and I do mean the Dr. Denise Hall Brown Rollins. And when I say that I am honored, that is truly an understatement. She is at the top of her game, y'all. She is a mentor, a friend, and just one of the most amazing and powerful women that I know. So I am beyond excited that she's here. She's also a life coach, a sought after speaker, and she's the executive director of the Whole Heart Grief and Life Resource Center located in Frederick, Maryland. She holds a doctorate in marriage and family therapy and a master's in thanatology and the practices associated with thanatology, including the needs of surviving family members of the dying. I told y'all she's the real deal. So welcome to the squad house, ladies. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yes, thank you for
Absolutely.
having us.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump right in. So, what I wanted was for us to take a deeper dive into self recovery, basically, or rebuilding your life after a trauma. For lack of a better phrase, when something traumatic happens to you, and you just don't know how to deal with it, how to accept that that trauma occurred in the first place. So we don't always know when we've been traumatized by something, how to deal with it and recreate a life after that. And that speaks to who you are at your core. So I just want to dig into that a little bit because so many people are dealing with traumatic situations that they've been faced with, whether it's the death of a loved one, a divorce, a career loss, some sort of debilitating injury. The list just goes on, and loss in any form can be very traumatic. And Dr. Rollins and I have talked about that before. So in the past, Dr. Rollins, I reached out to you when I was going through something. And, sometimes you feel guilty because I was thinking, how can I compare what I'm going through to somebody who lost a loved one or something like that? And can you speak to us a little bit? Because what you shared with me, that grief is grief, and, speak to that point for us about how you still have to get through the grief process, please.
Yeah. Well, Gail, I think it's really interesting because when I was doing my dissertation, it was on the bereavement experience of African American women.
Mm-hmm.
And it was following a death related loss. And I had these focus groups, and the women were in the room telling their stories of pain and how they got through it. But what I found was, just like you said, grief is grief and loss is loss. So one of my conclusions was it didn't matter whether it was the death of someone or the death of something like a relationship. I
Mm-hmm.
always remember when I first started doing some work at the church, a family member walked up to me and they were like, when you're grieving the person who died, that's one thing, but I'm grieving a divorce and I've got to see my person. And when I do, that hurts every single time. And it just made me step back for a minute and realize that pain is pain is pain.
Mm-hmm.
If you stood before God and family and said, I pledge to be with you the rest of my life, if that relationship ends before death comes, then there's a part of you that said, but I thought when we were in our 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, I thought that when our children got married, we would come as a couple. And so it's almost this constant regrieving of something that can be very painful. But even though you regrieve it, it doesn't have to keep you bound. It is acknowledging, okay, that is a painful for me. And then what can I do to take care of me in order to get
Mm.
through this? I think that's really important.
Okay. So
Mm.
so that's a great lead in because Tracy and I have similar experiences, and I'll let her share hers. But sometimes, Dr. Rollins, it's so hard because, say, for instance, with a divorce, you're going through it, your kids are going through it, so they're suffering. So you're so busy trying to minimize their pain and their trauma that you don't always have the time to take care of you because you just want to make sure your kids are okay. Because as a mother, that's just what we do. Tracy, would you say that was your experience trying to make sure the kids were okay first and foremost?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time trying to protect them
Mm,
from everything that was going on and protect them from the pain that I was experiencing. So I was walking around acting like everything was fine, I'm good, doing what I call Tracy, which is taking care of everybody and everything else.
absolutely.
And I didn't talk to them about it. I kept it in, and it just slowly began to eat away at who I am and what I was able to do. It got to a point where I fell apart because um, I couldn't walk and chew and talk and do all those things that I was used to doing on automatic pilot.
Right.
I just was in so much pain. And then on top of that, as you said, Gail, it wasn't just the divorce, it was also my mother was diagnosed with brain cancer. So I was, on the one hand,
My God.
dealing with the trauma of my mother and all of that that it takes with dealing with this elderly parent who's sick, she was very uncooperative, and just a lot of baggage from my childhood,
Mhm.
and dealing with, as Dr. Rollins said, you're with this person that you thought would be there with you through the end, thick and thin, and
Mhm.
they're not there. So I'm dealing with my mom, I'm dealing with the loss of my mother, dealing with the loss of this relationship, and I'm still trying to be everything to everybody else and
Mhm.
not taking care of me.
So Tracy, can I say that I work mostly with African American women? And that is the story of most of us. So now I ask the women that I see, who takes care of the woman who takes care of everybody else? And
Mm.
that's the same thing for Gail. Like
Mhm.
we were raised, you don't have time to cry, you don't have time to suck it up and keep going. And
Right.
so we saw our mamas being strong and our grandmamas being strong, and there's no image of what strength looks like in any other way, because I think strength is tears. So
Mhm.
here are these
Mm,
women who are sucking it up, and what they're doing is for every pain, they're pushing it down, and pushing it down, and pushing it down. And it's like a volcano. You keep pushing that thing down enough, it's going to come out in some way, usually on the wrong person at the wrong time, where we explode. And it's like, it's something little. You cut in
Mhm.
front of me in
yeah.
traffic, and I'm ready to fight because
Mhm.
I've been pushing it down. And I think that we tell ourselves that we don't have time to take care of ourselves, but I'm gonna call BS on that because the truth is we do. And
Mhm.
we need to, because I learned, especially after my husband died, I needed to show my sons me crying the days that I couldn't get out of the bed, because then they learned that it's okay. It's okay. I was
Mm,
still a strong woman, but sometimes I just had to take care of me.
Mhm.
right.
Mhm. Mhm.
You have to give yourself permission is one thing I learned. Like just giving myself permission to I gave myself permission to cry. At some point, I because I cried so much,
Mm.
And I kept beating myself up, like, "Why are you crying? Stop it. Pull yourself together." And I don't know, at one point, I finally just said, "You know what? It's okay. You can cry. Go
Mm.
ahead and cry." And I called it my weeping season. I think I cried for 6 months, but it was just letting go of all of that burden that I was carrying and all of the regrets, all of the doubts. Again, the relationship with my mother, I started looking in that relationship and realized how much I missed, that I just came to a point where I just said, I just gotta cry because I can't do anything else right now.
Mhm.
Mhm. Absolutely. I feel like, Dr. Rollins, do you feel like, because sometimes I feel like, what is it about me that that caused me to allow myself to be treated in a way that I knew was not what I deserved? And so I wonder, and I go back to a lot of my childhood, because I lost my mother as a young girl, and I had all these fears of abandonment and, not having a father in my life most of my childhood and adulthood. So I wonder if I held on so tight to somebody who was emotionally unavailable to me and who was verbally abusive, because I just had that fear of being abandoned yet again. So do
Mhm.
you think that plays into it for a lot of women?
I think it does, and I think all of us, just like Tracy said, she was grieving some parts of her mother's relationship. I think all of us have to go back and say, "Why did I hold on? Why did I experience it that way?" So for me, the process I try to walk women, anybody, but mostly women through is this self-awareness. Like, what's up with that? Why did I do that? Why am I so sensitive here? Why is it hurting me so much? And
Mhm.
when I figure out the why, then I figure out how I coach myself through things. Because the truth is, I'm gonna be going through things to the day I die. Hopefully, it's that I go through it and I learn and I get to another level, but I'm still gonna go through. So how do I coach myself? And then the last piece is, how do I take care of myself? So in your case, it, for me, I'd want to know the story of you growing up,
Mhm.
because yes, if you grew up um, without your mom and not that ideal family structure, holding on to that might have been one of it. You could have been a people pleaser. You could have been, for some of us. I remember when my husband died, and I was walking around without a ring on, and I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh my God, people are gonna think." I'm less than, because I had this image growing up as a child of divorce and feeling less than because I
Mhm.
didn't have a father in the home, that it was what's a bad
Mhm.
person who doesn't have a spouse. And I really had to, the 2 years that I worked on me after my husband died was the most incredible 2 years. I did like Tracy did. I had my weeping season, which now I know is good, because when we cry, toxins are released from our bodies. But I had my weeping season, I had my laughing season, I had my mad season. I went everywhere, but I
Mhm.
figured out who was Denise and what did she want for her. So much so that I remember when I met my current husband and he was talking about his wife who had died. And I remember saying to him, "I'm not her and I never can be her." And I
Right.
started looking around the room like, who said that? Because normally I want to please and become what you need me to be, right? And what I knew in that moment is I was comfortable enough in my skin that he had to accept me as I was, period. Not that I can never change, but that time of working on me was
Mm.
incredible.